He escaped the house they built to bury him. Now the world knows he's alive, but some people prefer him dead, and they're not finished. Far from the noise of the cities, in a small village called Greenhill, a young girl named Grace sat on a wooden stool, peeling cassava for dinner. The sun was hot, her hands were tired, but she kept working. She was used to hard work. Her family was poor, and she helped her mother with chores every day. Grace had dreams. Big ones. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to leave the village, wear clean clothes, and help children learn. But life doesn't always care about dreams. One evening, her father called her into the small hut they called home. His face was serious. "Grace," he said, "you're getting married next week." Grace blinked. She thought she heard wrong. "Married?" she asked softly. "Yes. His name is Daniel Blake. He's from the rich family near the hills. His people came today. They brought bride price, cows, money, food, everything. It's a good match. But I don't even know him," she whispered. "And I'm not ready for marriage." Her mother walked in, holding her arm. "Grace, he's sick. Very sick. His family said he won't live long. Just a few months. Once he passes, you'll be a rich widow. You can start a new life. They promised to give you land and money." Grace stood frozen. It felt like someone had poured cold water on her heart. "But why me?" she asked, voice shaking. "Why not someone else?" "Because," her father said slowly, "you are our only hope. This bride price will save our family." That night, Grace cried into her thin pillow. She wasn't marrying for love. She was being sold to a man waiting to die. The wedding day came fast. The entire village was there. People wore bright clothes, drums played loudly, and food was shared in every corner. But Grace felt like a prisoner. She wore a borrowed white dress. Her face was covered with a veil. She couldn't smile. Her legs felt weak. Then he came, Daniel Blake, the sick man she was to marry. He wore a fine white outfit and leaned on a walking stick. He looked pale, his steps slow. His mother, Madame Elaine, held his arm like he was made of glass. People whispered, "He may not last long." Others said, "That girl is lucky. She'll be rich before the year ends." Grace didn't feel lucky. They said their vows. The priest prayed. And just like that, Grace became Daniel's wife. That night in their new home, a large, quiet house near the hills, Grace sat on the edge of the bed, scared. The room was cold despite the thick blankets. Daniel lay on the bed, eyes closed. She looked at him, wondering if he would even wake up the next day. Suddenly he sat up. His movements were strong. His eyes sharp. Grace's breath caught in her throat. "You're awake?" she asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not dead yet," he said. "You can sleep." He turned and lay down again. Grace didn't sleep. Something wasn't right. Days passed. Grace cooked, cleaned, and watched. She tried to be a good wife, even though her heart wasn't in it. But the more she watched Daniel, the more confused she became. He walked without his stick when no one was looking. She once saw him lifting a bag of rice, heavy and full, but when she entered the room, he dropped it and coughed like he was weak. She found medicine bottles in the drawer. Some were empty, some sealed. Once she saw a paper on his desk. It had strange medical terms and a stamp from a hospital in the city. But when she asked, he said, "Don't touch my things." And then there was Elaine, Daniel's mother. She was always around, watching, listening, smiling too much. "Are you taking good care of my son?" she would ask. "Yes, Ma," Grace would reply, even though her heart said otherwise. Elaine's eyes always looked too deep, like she was searching Grace's soul. One evening, as Grace swept the living room, she noticed a small key under the chair. Curious, she picked it up and waited for everyone to sleep. That night, she opened a small cabinet in Daniel's study. Inside, she found a box filled with letters, photos, and a tiny silver recorder. She turned on the recorder. A man's voice spoke. "Daniel is not dying. Repeat. His condition is controlled. Fake medical reports delivered. Purpose: transfer assets without public suspicion. Grace's hand shook. What was this? Her husband wasn't dying. Was this whole marriage a lie? The next morning she pretended like nothing happened. But inside her mind raced. Why would a man fake illness? Why marry a girl like her? What were they hiding? That afternoon she went to the market. As she picked tomatoes, an old woman beside her whispered, "You are Daniel's wife, yes?" "Yes," Grace answered. The woman looked around, then said, "That family, they silence people. If you see too much, they will make you disappear." Grace's blood turned cold. "What do you mean?" The woman only shook her head. "Be careful, child. Watch your back." When Grace returned home, she saw Elaine standing at the gate. The woman's smile was wide, but her eyes were dark. "Did you buy everything?" she asked softly. "Yes, Ma." Elaine nodded. "Good. Stay close to Daniel. Don't wander too far. You belong here now." Grace smiled, but her heart beat fast. She knew something was wrong. Deeply wrong. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She opened the box again and looked at the photos. One caught her attention. Daniel and another young man, both smiling. On the back it was written, "Nathan, 5 years before the fire." Fire. She'd never heard of a fire. And who was Nathan? As Grace stared at the photo, a thought came to her. What if Nathan was the one they buried? And Daniel wasn't the sick one. He was the hunter. Grace couldn't stop thinking about the photo. Nathan. Who was he? And what fire had taken place? She hid the photo and recorder deep in her clothes chest. That morning, while Daniel was away with his mother, she tiptoed back into the study. Her hands shook as she opened the cabinet again. This time, she found a torn envelope with a hospital logo. Inside was a report. It said, "Patient name, Nathan Blake. Status, deceased. Cause, unknown. No physical body recovered." Grace's heart skipped. Nathan was declared dead. But no body. She checked the date, 5 years ago. Around the same time Daniel started acting sick. That day, Grace didn't talk much. Her hands moved slowly while pounding yam. Her mind was somewhere else. She watched Daniel carefully during dinner. He coughed twice, then excused himself to his room. Moments later, she crept down the hallway and peeked through the keyhole. Daniel was standing, tall, strong, and perfectly fine, talking on the phone. She could hear his voice clearly now. "She's suspicious. I saw her in the study yesterday. No, she hasn't found the vault. Don't worry. If she does, we'll handle it." Grace's fingers turned cold. Handle it. She rushed quietly back to the kitchen and pretended to be slicing onions. The next morning, a stranger arrived in the compound. He was tall and had sharp eyes. He handed a package to Madame Elaine and left quickly. Grace watched through the curtain. Elaine opened the package in the living room. Grace leaned closer. Inside was a set of small bottles, each with a red label. She heard Elaine say softly, "Just a few drops in her tea." Grace gasped quietly. Were they trying to poison her? Why? Was it because she knew too much? That night, Grace didn't eat or drink anything in the house. She said she was fasting. Daniel just nodded, his smile cold. When everyone slept, Grace packed a small bag and sneaked out through the back fence. She walked fast to the only person she could trust, Elijah, her childhood friend. Elijah lived near the market. He was surprised to see her at his door late at night, but when he saw her eyes, he didn't ask questions. "I need help," she whispered. He made her tea, and they sat on a mat under the stars. Grace told him everything, about the fake sickness, the recorder, Nathan, and the plan to harm her. Elijah sat quietly, rubbing his chin. "I knew something was off about that family," he said. "But this is big." "I think Nathan is alive," Grace whispered. "And I think they used me for something dark." The next day, Elijah helped her return to Daniel's house while everyone was out. They searched for more clues. Inside a locked drawer, Elijah found a stack of photos. One of them showed Daniel, Nathan, and a white building in the background. On the building was a name, Harrow. Grace pointed at it. "That's the place." "Looks like a hospital," Elijah said. "No, more like a prison." There were other photos too. Doctors, strange equipment, people who look sleepy or sick, but not truly ill. Then they found a letter addressed to Elaine. "Your son's records have been wiped. Nathan's reprogramming was incomplete. If he resurfaces, Harrow must be protected at all costs." Reprogramming. Grace suddenly remembered how Daniel sometimes spoke like someone reading a script. Low. Like he was trained. Elijah looked at her. "Grace, you're not just part of a lie. You're part of a cover-up." That evening, as Grace returned home alone, she felt eyes on her. At the gate stood a young maid, barely 16, who handed her a folded note. "Don't drink the tea tonight," the girl whispered. "They know you've been sneaking around." Grace opened the note. "Leave before it's too late. You're not the first bride they've used. The others never made it out." Her hand shook. She turned and saw Elaine standing on the porch, smiling. "Welcome home, dear. I hope you're hungry." That night, Grace pretended to eat. She chewed but didn't swallow. She smiled, laughed, and acted normal. But inside, her heart pounded like a drum. She waited until midnight, then quietly left again, this time for good. She met Elijah at the village well. They walked far, past the river, past the farmlands, until they reached the town on the other side. There, Elijah introduced her to a man he trusted. A man who once worked in the city as a hospital file clerk. His name was Baba Tund. He listened carefully, then said, "Harrow is not a hospital. It's a place where rich families erase people. They remove memories, rewrite stories. They take the ones who speak out, and make them disappear." Grace looked down. "They tried to do that to Nathan, didn't they?" Baba Tund nodded slowly. "And maybe to me next," she added. Before they left, Baba Tund handed them an old file. "I took this before I ran." Inside was Nathan's full medical report. It didn't match Daniel's. Nathan had no sickness. Daniel had none either. But Nathan had something else, a mark. A birthmark on his neck. Shaped like a flame. Grace closed the file. "I saw that mark on Daniel's neck. The first night of the wedding. Before he covered it with powder." Elijah's eyes widened. "Then that's not Daniel," Grace whispered. "They switched names. They faked death. Nathan isn't gone. He's Daniel now," Elijah added. "And maybe Daniel is the one they buried instead." Back in the shadows of the house, Grace's absence didn't go unnoticed. Elaine stared at her son's bed, empty. She picked up the phone. "She's gone," she said coldly. "And she knows about Nathan." The voice on the other end replied, "Then we end this. Tonight." Grace and Elijah didn't sleep that night. They stayed at a small guest house in the next town. The room was old, with cracked walls and a noisy ceiling fan, but it was safe for now. Grace couldn't stop thinking about what Baba Tund had said. They erase people. They rewrite stories. And now, she knew the truth in her heart. Daniel Blake was not who he said he was. He was Nathan. And the real Daniel was either dead or hidden. But why? The next morning, Elijah went to visit a printing shop. He had scanned all the photos and documents they had taken from the Blake house. He wanted to keep copies just in case. Grace walked through the nearby market to clear her head. As she passed a row of banana sellers, a voice whispered behind her, "You shouldn't have run." She turned around fast. But no one was there. Her heartbeat quickened. She looked around. Faces everywhere but all unknown. Suddenly, someone grabbed her wrist from behind. She screamed. It was a man in a faded green jacket. His face was rough, with a long scar across his cheek. "Elijah sent me," he said quickly. "Your room isn't safe anymore." Someone followed him. Now. Grace didn't move. How do I know you're telling the truth? She asked. He reached into his jacket and showed her Elijah's notebook, the one with all their notes and names. Grace nodded and followed him into a back alley. They moved through narrow paths and empty buildings until they reached an old church. Elijah was already inside, pacing. "I'm sorry," he said when she entered. They were watching the guest house. "We had to move." Grace sat down, tired. "I don't understand, Elijah. Why would someone fake being sick? Why would someone erase their own brother?" Elijah looked at her carefully. "I think it's all about power," he said. "And inheritance. The Blake family has wealth, lands, and secrets. Nathan was the real heir. But someone wanted him out of the way." Grace whispered, "Elaine." Elijah nodded. "And maybe Daniel helped her do it. Or maybe—" He refused. "That's why he disappeared." They needed more answers. So Elijah took them to an old man named Papa Sola, a retired security guard who once worked at Harrow, the mysterious building from the photo. Papa Sola lived in a wooden house near the edge of the forest. He was blind in one eye and walked with a cane, but his mind was still sharp. When he heard the name Blake, he froze. "That family," he said softly. "You shouldn't speak their name unless you want to vanish." "We need the truth," Grace said firmly. He sighed. "I saw things at Harrow, things no man should see. Young men brought in days later, they don't remember their names. Some were made to believe they were someone else." He looked up, one eye sharp and shining. One boy fought back. He had a flame-shaped mark on his neck. He said his name was Nathan. Grace gasped. "That's him," she said. "What happened to him?" Papa Sola shook his head. "One night, alarms went off. Fire. Smoke. The boy escaped. After that, Harrow erased all the records. They told us never to speak of it again." Later that night, Grace sat alone with her thoughts. The puzzle was almost complete. Nathan had been declared dead, but escaped. Daniel vanished around the same time. Elaine had rebranded Nathan as Daniel to control his inheritance and make him marry a poor girl, Grace, to cover it all. But why her? She looked at herself in the mirror. She was simple, or quiet. Then it hit her. She wasn't chosen because she was special. She was chosen because no one would listen to her. A disposable wife. Cover story. A shadow bride. The next day, Grace and Elijah went to the city. They followed a new lead, a burnt-down storage building once owned by the Blakes. In the rubble, Elijah found a metal box buried under ash. Inside was a journal, burned at the edges but readable. It was written by Nathan. "They say I am Daniel now. They say I must forget. But I remember. I remember the fire. I remember Chuka." Grace stopped reading. Chuka. Another name. Another brother. She turned the page. "Chuka tried to help me escape. They caught him. I don't know if he's alive." Elijah looked stunned. "There's a third brother. Maybe he's the missing key," Grace whispered. "Maybe he knows everything." As they left the building, Grace spotted a man standing across the road. He was tall, wearing black glasses and a suit. He looked like security, and he was watching them. Grace tugged Elijah's arm. "We're being followed." They ran. Down alleys, across roads, through crowds. They lost the man near a train station. Breathless, Grace turned to Elijah. "We can't run forever." "I know," he said. "But now we know too much to stop." He pulled out a tiny flash drive from his bag. "All the files. We leak this, everything goes public." Grace paused. "Not yet. We still don't have Chuka. Or Daniel's real role. We can't just guess. We need the full truth." Back at their new safe house, they found something shocking. A letter had been slipped under the door. No name. No handwriting. Just a sentence. "You're looking for Chuka. He's not dead. But he's no longer on your side." Grace stared at it for a long time. What did it mean? If Chuka was alive. but dangerous. Were they heading into a trap? She folded the note. "We find him anyway," she said. "Even snakes leave trails." Far away, in a quiet corner of Harrow's remains, a man with a flame-shaped scar stared at a wall covered in photos. He picked up a phone and made a call. "They know," he said. The voice on the other end replied. "Then it's time to bring her in." The morning was cold and gray as Grace and Elijah stood before the gates of a hidden compound deep in the hills. It didn't have a signboard, but they knew exactly where they were. Harrow. The place from the photos. The place where Nathan was taken. Where identities were wiped. Where secrets were buried. From outside it looked like a wellness center. Tall, clean buildings with white paint, gardens and security cameras. But behind the beauty was darkness. Elijah turned to Grace. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Grace nodded. "We're already deep in it. We either find the truth or die trying." They didn't walk through the front gate. That would be stupid. Instead, Elijah had gotten a map from Baba Tund. Years ago, a worker at Harrow had escaped and drawn out the hidden paths. One of them led to an old water pipe that snuck beneath the back fence. It smelled terrible and was tight and wet, but after crawling through darkness, they came out behind a storage shed inside Harrow's compound. Grace coughed and wiped her face. "That's the last time I crawl through a sewer." Elijah smiled weakly. "Let's just not die today." They slipped into the shadows and waited for the sun to set. At night, Harrow changed. Got quiet. Too quiet. Nurses moved like ghosts, and people in white clothes walked around slowly, like they were lost in a dream. Grace and Elijah hid behind a bush near the patient building. They could hear soft music, gentle voices, and whispers that didn't sound human. Then they saw him. Nathan. Or was it Daniel? He stepped out of the building with a file in his hand. But he wasn't alone. Another man walked beside him. Strong build, darker skin, and a thick scar across his neck. Grace's eyes widened. "That's Chuka," Elijah whispered. "He's alive." But neither of them looked happy. They weren't smiling. They were serious, like soldiers on a mission. And then Nathan stopped. He turned his head slightly and looked right at the bush. Grace held her breath. Did he see them? But after a second, he turned away and walked back into the building. They waited 10 minutes, then followed quietly. Elijah had stolen a nurse's badge from a laundry bin and used it to open the side door. The hallway was white, cold, and smelled like chemicals. Grace's feet made no sound on the tile. Room after room, she peeked in and saw patients sleeping, strapped to beds. Some mumbled. Some stared at nothing. Some just lay still, eyes open but empty. "This place isn't for healing," Grace whispered. "It's for breaking people." Finally, they found the office Nathan had walked into. They waited until the hall was clear, then slipped inside. Inside they found a table full of files. One was marked, Patient 197A Nathan Blake. Grace opened it quickly. Inside were records of fake treatments, drug doses, sleep sessions, and brain scans. All made to make Nathan seem sick. All meant to control him. Then she found another file. Chuka Blake. Classified. Failed reprogramming. Status. Dangerous. There were notes. Subject refuses mental therapy. Escaped once. Captured. Currently contained. Unstable. Avoid direct contact. Suddenly the door opened. Grace froze. Nathan stood there. But this time he didn't pretend. He didn't cough. He didn't limp. His back was straight. His eyes were sharp. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Grace stepped forward. "You're not Daniel, are you?" He sighed. "No. I'm Nathan. I've always been Nathan. But they wanted me dead." "And Chuka?" Elijah asked. Nathan glanced down the hall. "He's alive. But different. He tried to save me once. They broke him instead." "Why marry me?" Grace asked. "Why pretend to be dying?" Nathan looked her in the eye. "I didn't want to. But my mother said if I didn't do it, Chuka would die." She said you were simple, quiet, perfect for the story. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You used me. I tried to protect you, Nathan said. But I was already too deep. He opened a locker in the wall and pulled out a heavy duffel bag. Inside were USBs, documents, photos, blueprints. All the evidence, he said. Everything Harrow has done. People they erased. Families they destroyed. But it's not safe here, he added. They know I'm helping you. We have to leave now. As they turned to go, an alarm blared. Intruders detected. Security to Wing B. Nathan cursed. They saw you come in. He pulled a gun from the locker and handed a stun baton to Elijah. We'll go through the tunnel. My father built a secret exit before he died. They ran. Down the hallway. Through the maintenance wing. Past nurses yelling into radios. Chuka was there waiting by the basement door. His face was hard. His eyes cold. But when he saw Grace, something changed. He stepped aside and opened the door. Go, he said. I'll hold them off. Come with us, Nathan begged. Chuka shook his head. I can't. Not yet. He closed the door behind them. Gunshots rang out. They ran through the dark tunnel, up a steep slope, and burst into the forest outside. Breathless, bloody, but alive. Grace clutched the bag of evidence. Nathan held her hand. Elijah led the way. They didn't stop until they reached a small roadside motel 10 miles away. Inside they locked the door. Nathan opened his laptop and said, We go live at midnight. As the files uploaded, Grace sat on the bed, tired but awake. Why now? She asked. Why expose them now? Nathan looked at her. Because if we don't, they'll keep doing this. To more people. To more families. And you. He paused. You reminded me of who I used to be. Brave. Honest. Free. She looked away. You still lied to me. I know, he said softly. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix that. If I live long enough. Outside, a car drove slowly past the motel. Inside it sat Elaine Blake, holding a lighter and a red gas can. The motel was quiet. Too quiet. Inside room 7, Nathan sat at the table, uploading the final files. The laptop's screen blinked. 94% complete. Grace stood by the window watching the road. Elijah paced the floor, peeking through the curtains every few seconds. Suddenly Grace gasped. There's someone outside. A black car was parked under the streetlight. A woman stepped out. She wore a long coat and a scarf that covered her hair. But Grace knew that face. Elaine Blake. She's here, Grace whispered. Elijah grabbed the USBs and stuffed them into a bag. Nathan closed the laptop quickly and pulled Grace close. We have to leave. But before they could move, boom! A small explosion rocked the back of the motel. Flames burst through the window. Smoke filled the room. She set the place on fire. Elijah shouted. They grabbed the laptop and files and ran out the front door, coughing and choking on the smoke. Elaine stood calmly by her car, lighting another match. Where do you think you're going? She said coldly. Nathan stepped in front of Grace. It's over, Mother. The truth is out. Elaine raised an eyebrow. You think anyone will believe you? You're just a sick boy, remember? Nathan held up the USB. Not anymore. They ran. Through the dark streets, past old shops and closed restaurants. Grace's chest burned with every breath. But she didn't stop. They couldn't stop. By morning they reached a nearby city. A journalist named Kemi, who Elijah had contacted, met them at a coffee shop downtown. Kemi wore glasses and spoke fast. I've seen the files. Believe you. But I need one more thing, someone from the inside. Someone alive. Nathan looked at Grace. Then he said, We know where he is. They drove back toward Harrow. This time they weren't sneaking in. They had cameras. They had witnesses. And they had Kemi with them. But when they arrived, Harrow was empty. The gates were open. The windows broken. Documents were burning in trash bins outside. Grace's heart sank. They're covering their tracks. Suddenly, a man stumbled out from the building, limping and covered in ash. Chuka. He had a bruised face and a bloodied hand, but his eyes were full of fire. "You're late," he said. Nathan ran to him. "You're alive." "Barely," Chuka replied. "They tried to erase everything, but I saved the backup." He held up a tiny chip. "This has names, files, videos, proof." Kemi nodded. "That's all I need." That night the truth went live. Nathan sat in front of a plain white wall. A single camera recorded. He spoke slowly, clearly. "My name is Nathan Braxton. For years my family said I was sick, that I was dying. But I wasn't. They made me believe it, to erase me. They used places like Harrow to break people. My brother Chuka tried to stop them. They silenced him too. But today we speak." Behind him, Grace held up the photo of the three brothers. Kemi posted it everywhere. And the world listened. Within hours the video was trending. By morning it was on the news. Exclusive. Elite family exposed in identity fraud and memory manipulation. Harrow Center under investigation. My family erased me. Nathan Braxton speaks out. People everywhere were shocked. Some cried. Some raged. But none could ignore the truth. Elaine Blake was arrested the next week. She tried to run, but international agents caught her at a private airport. Her face, once cold and perfect, was now scared and broken. When asked why she did it, she simply said, "Because control is better than chaos." Grace returned to Green Hill months later. She walked through the same market where she used to sell fruits. People stopped and stared. Children pointed. "That's her," one said. "The girl who exposed them." Grace didn't smile. She wasn't proud. She was still healing. But when she saw her old house and her mother ran out crying, hugging her tightly, she felt something warm. Elijah opened a small library in the town square. Chuka moved to another country for safety, but he called often. Nathan stayed by Grace's side. They didn't speak of love. Not yet. But when Grace looked into his eyes, she saw the truth. He wasn't pretending anymore. 1 year later, Grace stood at the village square. A large crowd had gathered. Journalists, villagers, students. She walked to the front, holding a microphone. "My name is Grace," she began. "And I was forced to marry a man who was supposed to die, but didn't. I was used." Later. Almost silenced. He paused. The crowd was still. "But I chose to fight. I found my voice. And I won't let anyone take it again." They clapped. She smiled, a small tear rolling down her cheek. The curse was broken. Not by magic, but by truth. Far away in a dark prison cell, Elaine Blake stared at the wall. Her kingdom had fallen. And the girl she thought was powerless was now the one voice the world could not ignore.